Welcome into my eyeshadow ranking video, you guys. I'm really excited to do this. I have been doing eyeshadow rankings for the last, I want to say almost a year now. For 2022, I did a full ranking of all 72 eyeshadow palettes that I tried. I will link that up in the cards. But I have been doing them every single quarter of all the eyeshadow palettes that I have been testing. I know we're not exactly at the end of quarter 3, but I still feel like it was a good time to do an eyeshadow palette ranking because I did have 25 eyeshadow palettes that I have tested. So that's what we're gonna do today. I always start off with my least favorite and work my way to my favorite. I am wearing my favorite today, so stay tuned if you guys wanna see the most basic, neutral, boring eyeshadow palette at number 1. So coming in at number 25 at the very bottom is a little palette from Relove. This is the Empower palette. Mine did come broken, so the only shimmer shade in here has about like half left, which doesn't bother me, but I'm somebody who always uses a lighter shimmer on my lid. So every time a palette comes without a lighter shimmer, I usually don't like it as much, and that's just a personal preference. You're gonna hear that a lot in this video. The mattes overall are pretty lightly pigmented. They're on the powdery side. They don't have very much longevity to them. And granted, this palette retails for, I wanna say, around the $3 mark. So it's a really affordable brand from Makeup Revolution that sells in Walmart. And so if you're on a budget, it's not terrible. And the color story isn't half bad. I feel like for me, without that shimmer shade, this isn't even like a good travel palette. And I told you guys already that the quality is kind of subpar. So I feel like there are other affordable options out there that are pretty decent. I really didn't enjoy this one. So this is actually probably one that I won't keep in my collection come at the end of the year, or at least like I'll keep for makeup reference, which you might hear me say a lot in this video, just so that I have something affordable from Relove. But I don't want to keep this in my permanent collection because it's not going to be something I end up reaching for over other ones. The next one up is an all glitter palette. This one is the Ruby Gems from Profusion. This looks way more beat up than I have actually used this. The Profusion packaging is just kind of on the cheaper side. I've only used this a handful of times, and honestly, it looks like I've had this for years. I like glitters on occasion, and that's the reason that I got this, kind of just to have fun and play with. This just doesn't stick together is the problem. Everything is just very patchy. There's just a ton of fallout. There's just not formulated with enough like tack to it so that it really sticks. And with a glitter palette, that's basically all you have to do. It's just formulate your glitters good enough so that they like stick together and kind of apply to the eye evenly. I like the shade range. Like, I think it's really good. There's maybe these two shades that are fairly similar, but aside from that, you have a pretty decent gradient to it. It's just that the formulation on the glitters is just not that great. I have had some Profusion palettes in the past that were my holy grails. They're basically all I ever reached for, but I kind of feel like Profusion eyeshadow quality has gone a little bit downhill lately. So that's why that one is at number 24. Coming in at number 23 was one that I got free with purchase, and this one is made by Mitchell. It is his Mini Mitchell Volume 1 palette. On the back of the palette, it says neutral mattes, pops of blues, and vibrant pinks, all you need to keep your feet on the ground and your head in the clouds. So I get that he was trying to throw some like neutral shades in there with some fun pops of color. It's just all over the place for me. I have 3 neutral shades in here that I could easily use to make a really nice look. You can take that lighter Walters Box shade and put it all over, and then the one in the middle that's called Halfway, you can kind of put in the crease, and then the one at the bottom, it's Cocoa Pop. But if you play with any of the other colorful shades, which there's only 2 colorful mattes in here, it's like a pink and a purple, I feel like you can't pair it with any of the shimmers. I feel the same way about all 3 of these neutral matte shades. Like, what shimmer would you pair this with? And for me personally, I'm constantly like matte pairing it with a shimmer. Like, I don't walk out the door without a shimmer on my lid. And for some of you, that may not be a big deal. Some of you might not like that, but this is just all over the place for me. The shimmers are actually pretty decent. They look kind of like they would be mattes with like a tiny bit of shimmer in it, but they actually have a good amount of light reflection to them, and the shimmers aren't bad. It's just that I'm not going to grab for this palette for a neutral shade. And so if I think about maybe grabbing for like this teal shimmer or this neon green one in the corner here, that would be like the only thing I could see this palette kind of being worth it to keep. But this Cocoa Pop shade down here is pretty darn patchy, which is such a bummer because it's the only real deepening shade for your neutral look. So I don't know. It honestly just didn't hit in like a lot of areas for me. So that's why it came in at number 23. Coming in at number 22 is a fairly new release. This is one from the Pop-Tarts collection from Too Faced. This is their Frosted Strawberry palette. This one, again, does not have a good shimmer shade in here. It has that Frosted Strawberry shade, which I wish was a shimmer shade. It's basically like a matte with sparkle, but it's mostly like a patchy little matte shade. So it's pretty terrible. I don't love all of these tones together, and the shimmer formula in these two over here in the corner, it's pretty bad. They're fairly light, they're not overly light reflecting, and this Frost Yourself shade in the corner here, I don't use a brightening shade, so this for me is a useless shade. In a palette that has 8 pans, I feel like that's a little bit of a bummer for me. It's a little bit of a letdown, just how I like to create my eye look. It's not a terrible color story per se. I feel like you could get a brown look and then a more reddish look. It's just that no shimmers. I didn't love the tones together. There's one useless shade. No, it wasn't honestly my cup of tea. I would say that the longevity in the mattes, it wasn't half bad. It really, really wasn't. So if you're a fan of Too Faced and you kind of like this color story and you don't really care to have a lighter shimmer, then I don't think it's half bad. It's just that my eyes are so hooded. I feel like if I don't bring in a lighter shimmer, you don't really see much of my lid at all. So I really do try and like accentuate it. So when it doesn't have a lighter shimmer, and it's hard to see when it's online too, it's a little bit of a bummer for me. So I'm probably not going to keep that palette either. It's probably going to end up getting decluttered at the end of the year as well. So coming in at number 21, I'm a little sad, but it is from BH Cosmetics. It's the Garnet palette from their Birthstone series. This one is for the month of January. I actually have many of these palettes in my collection, and I think this one is still available on the BH Cosmetics website. And so slowly I've been trying to get my hands on all of the palettes from the Birthstone series. Of course, not all of them are available, but this color story was not fantastic. I do love their pressed glitter formula. It's honestly one of the best. This black one here, it is such good quality, and BH Cosmetics usually throws in a light shimmer, so I love that. The problem with this palette was these browns were so patchy. They were bad. They would not blend, packing them in the outer corner, and then they were just like staying there. They were extremely, extremely patchy. And you know what? BH Cosmetics is a hit or miss sometimes, but usually it's a hit. I love BH Cosmetics palettes, and this is one before Makeup Revolution purchased them, so it's not like a new formulation or anything. This is one of their older palettes, but these browns were honestly quite awful. So I don't really get a whole lot of use out of it, because this shade, this Go-Getter shade in red, not one that I usually reach for. Like, reds are really hard to pull off on an everyday basis. So I was mostly excited for like this shade, the light shimmer, this red shimmer, and the darker browns, and the browns are poopy. Okay, the next 3 are all from the same collection, and they go in order of, I want to say color story, and I'm also sorry to put them where I put them because I'm basically a collector of their palettes, just like BH Cosmetics. I have a ton of them, and I've honestly had success in almost every other palette that I have from them except the series. So hot take, if you guys are Viseart fans, the one coming in at number 20 is from their Lotus collection. This one is the Water Lotus. This is a quad. All 3 of these are quads. These are their petite foies. This was honestly the most powdery matte formula, and Viseart, while I love their shimmers, they're usually super good, super light reflecting. Sometimes they do duochromes that are out of this world, but they're still sophisticated light. Viseart is usually a brand that I can amp up or I can wear on an everyday basis. But for whatever reason, these shimmers were not as light reflecting. The mattes were incredibly powdery. And when I did my dedicated video on this collection, I felt like they were halfway decent, just not like super pigmented, but they faded so fast. I feel like this is a different formulation in this collection. I was not a fan. This one, yeah, it just faded so quickly. And I love the color combo. Like, I love the color story. You have a lighter shimmer, a darker shimmer, a lighter matte, and a darker matte. Like, it's everything that I would want in a teal, minty green quad, or any color story quad. It's just, the mattes and shimmers were bad. Sad to say, I love Viseart, but this one comes in at number 20. Coming in at number 19 is again from the Lotus collection. This one is the Sakura Lotus. I like this one a little bit better because of the color story, because you get the same number of mattes and shimmers 2 mattes, 2 shimmers. I love an even ratio. So I love that Viseart usually includes an even number of mattes to shimmers. Again, it's just a really powdery matte formula. The one light shimmer really doesn't show up that well. I'm telling you guys, I just don't think these are the same quality as a lot of their other formulations, a lot of their other palettes. If I keep these, I just don't see myself reaching for it. I feel like I'll keep it as a collector because I love Viseart shadows. I can't see myself reaching for these because I have other Viseart shadows I would rather reach for than these ones, irrespective of color story. The next one is the final one from the Lotus collection. It's Rosea Lotus. Again, I think I like this one the best because of color story, and I think it's a beautiful look. I do get one beautiful look out of it every single time, and I usually go in for all 4 of the shades when I create my eye look. I'll use 2 different shimmers on the eyes, but this one is the least longest lasting. The other 2 actually are a little bit less powdery and last a little bit longer than this one does. So even though I love this color story more, I definitely don't love the longevity of this one in comparison to the other 2. It's just, honestly, it's the most powdery matte formula from them I've ever tried. So yeah, just not a huge fan. I feel like it's totally a different formulation. I'm gonna stick with that because I wanna love their shadows. I don't wanna have this powdery nonsense in like future collections. That's why that one comes in at number 18. Moving on to number 17 is another one from like a series. This is one of the cutie palettes from Nabla. This is their platinum palette. I'm also a collector of these cutie palettes, and overall I usually really like them. I think Nabla does a tremendous job with their shimmers. It's honestly one of my favorite shimmer formulas of the palettes that I have. This color story is actually really nice. You get more shimmers in here than you get mattes, but that's kind of fun. You can build different shimmer looks off of kind of the basic 2 matte tones. The problem is these mattes are bad. These are the worst patchy brown matte shadows. It's not a color thing. It's not as though they look muddy. They just do not blend out. Bare eyes, primer, doesn't matter. They're super, super patchy. The thing that saves this is the shimmer formula is absolutely to die for. It's really, really good. And I love this silver one in the middle. So beautiful on the eyes, and it pops and it saves this palette. So I can use this as a companion palette because I love these 4 shimmer shades, but I have never experienced such patchy mattes from Nabla in the past, so that's why this one comes in at number 17. The next one is an affordable option, also comes with more than 1 palette kind of in this collection. I have both of those in the video, but this one coming in at number 16 is the Essence Cape Cod palette. I have heard that Essence has a really hit or miss formula, and I don't have a lot of Essence palettes, so I don't have a lot of experience. What I will say about this palette is that the shimmer formula in some of these shimmers is so good. Now, some of them are toppers. I don't love a topper shimmer. That's personally just not my thing. When I get shades that are really beautiful that are toppers, I get a little bit disappointed. I love the color story. I think it's kind of fall, and that I really like about it. But these mattes are all bad, every single one of them. I've done a teal look in this deep teal shade, super patchy. All 3 of these more like neutrally fall colors, super patchy. The mattes in here are terrible. What saves this palette is the shimmers, the ones that aren't toppers. This one in the corner, total topper, which is a bummer because it's such a beautiful shimmer shade. But every one of these shimmers is so delightful and delicious, and that's really what saves this. I don't know if I'll hold on to this one in particular from Essence because the other one that they have that I'm going to show you guys is an all shimmer palette, and that one is totally worth keeping. This for me is a full-on companion palette for the shimmer shades because the mattes are almost unworkable, to be honest. Okay, let's move on to number 15. This is an indie brand. It's the Capricorn palette from Cara Beauty. I think this is an okay palette. I have a little bit of trouble building a blue look because there's only 1 blue matte in here, but you can get a pinky purple look and you can get a pretty neutral look. I feel like the out of place piece here is the green shimmer for me. I love that they have this really light white shimmer in here, and the shimmer formula is really nice. The mattes are also pretty good quality. It's mostly a color story thing for me that I just have a difficult time trying to use every shade. The blue matte and the green shimmer totally get ignored personally, just from how I like to create my eye looks. But some people are way more skilled at doing eyeshadow than I am, and so they can create fun, really colorful looks and bring in like a lot of different shimmers. But personally for me, I struggle with those 2 shades. Again, I tell you guys, the matte formula is pretty decent. The shimmer formula is quite honestly fantastic. It's just a color story thing for me. Okay, coming in at number 14. If you guys have seen any of my videos, are returning viewers, have watched me talk about eyeshadow palettes, you know that I've recently fallen in love with eyeshadow formula from this brand. This is the Rose Lens palette from MAC. They recently dropped these Connect and Color eyeshadow palettes, and I want to say there was probably 7 in total. This one was my least favorite of all the Connect and Color eyeshadow palettes that I tried because there's really only 2 matte shades in here. The one in the corner that's that beige color, again, useless for me. I don't brighten with my mattes. If you guys like that, I feel like it'd be good. The only other matte in here is this bright pink one, and there's nothing really to pair it with. I thought I would like the shade on my eye a little bit more. I didn't love the way that it looked. You can pair it with this shimmer right here, but I wish there was just a different pink shade that I could build the look off of. The thing with MAC's shimmers is that they're on the lighter side. They don't have a lot of reflection. They're very kind of like sophisticated, everyday, wearable shimmer formula, and I like that. I think it's unique. I think it's their thing. I think it's great. It's fine to have like a shimmer that isn't super light reflecting, and I can totally get down with it. I just wish there was like another matte in here or 2 different mattes in here. Total color story thing for me. The matte formula is superb. It blends itself. These are like beginner friendly mattes. I think MAC killed it. They're pigmented, they're long lasting, they blend themselves. Ooh, so good. But still, color story thing for me, so that's why I liked that one the least of all the Connect and Color ones that I have. Next one that I have is also one from Essence. This one comes in at number 13. It is the all shimmer palette. It's called Sin City. Okay, so there may be like one satin shade or one like matte with sparkles in it, which is that blue one in the corner. Otherwise, this is an entirely shimmer palette, and none of these are toppers. And they're all really punchy, chunky, super light reflecting shimmers. There's nothing wrong with the quality of it. There's nothing wrong with the color story. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the formula. This definitely ranked where it did because it's a companion palette. That's it. It's just not a palette that I can reach for by itself. And I feel like even though Essence killed it with the shimmer formula, some of my indie brands kill it better. But honestly, like if you're looking for an affordable shimmer palette from the drugstore, like this is definitely a recommendation from me. It's just a companion palette, that's all. The next one up is another one from MAC from the Connect and Color. This one is the Bronze Influence. This is again another one with the 2 mattes and the 4 shimmer shades. I like this one better than the Rose Lens. The deepening shade is almost like a green, so it's a little bit weird. Like I wish it had been a deeper brown so it would have matched like the bronziness of the palette, like as the name implies, instead of like this super deep green. It's a look all in itself. It just kind of threw me when I got it because I did order this online that it wasn't like a black, because I kind of thought it was going to be a black. I like the matte shades though. Quality is really good. I really like the shimmer formula. Again, just really good, sophisticated, nice quality, just everyday like wedding vibe shimmer formula is what I think of with the MAC shimmer formula. I even like the shades. The tones are very different in the shimmer formula, and you could even skip deepening if you wanted to, or use one of the shimmers to deepen. I just wish, because I love deepening the outer corner, that this was like a deep brown, a deep bronze, or even a black shade. That would have been cool. That's my only thing about this. Otherwise, the quality on this is fantastic. The next one is another one from the collection of one of the ones I've already shown you. This one is coming in at number 11. This is the Brown Sugar palette from the Pop-Tarts collection from Too Faced. So here's why this one ranks higher than the pink one, because I told you that I think the matte formula in the other Too Faced palette was halfway decent. The longevity was pretty decent, but it was lacking a shimmer shade. This one I can actually get depth with in the matte shades, but also the shimmers in here are really nice, and you have this brown sugar cinnamon shimmer that's beautiful. So while I get pretty much the same look over and over, it's just kind of this warm toned look that I really like. And because the mattes were pretty decent quality and the shimmer is pretty decent quality, it ranks higher because it's a more wearable palette for me. The only bummer is that this Bite Me shade is a topper. Again, can't really do anything with toppers. They just don't overly excite me. They may excite some people, so I could see why there's a use for it, but I just feel like Too Faced always throws in 1 or 2 toppers in every single one of their palettes. And I feel like they could easily just not do that. They could just add another shimmer in there. That would make a lot of their palettes really good. Okay, we are on to the top 10, and I feel like you guys might be surprised how I rank these. I mean, I'm looking at my list and I'm like, maybe I'm a little surprised, but it's just the way that it worked out based on how I ended up feeling about the palettes, like as I was wearing them through the day, or just catching myself in the mirror, or really just in application itself, like what wowed me and what didn't. So on to number 10 is a quad from Pat McGrath. This is one of the Luxe eyeshadow quads in Passion Floor. This has 1 matte shade and 3 shimmer shades, and the 2 shimmer shades at the top are on the lighter side and nothing to write home about. And this deep plum shade comes out such a bright purple on my skin. I wish it was a little bit of a deeper, more burgundy shade than this pretty true purple when it translates to a fair skin tone, because I could build an entire eye look off of that shade. It's just that I don't find myself reaching for that purple. That purple is so pigmented. It's honestly one of the best mattes from Pat that I have ever tried. So I love the quality of it. It's just the color when it gets to my skin isn't great. But I feel like what makes this palette so good, in my opinion, is this one shimmer in Sienna Moonlight, this like coppery tone. It is delicious. It's delicious and smooth and so beautiful on the eyes. I kept reaching for this shimmer shade and bringing in mattes from other palettes. But let's talk about a bummer in the shimmer formula. This one up here, which I feel like is in Skin Show Pink Dawn, is more like of a topper shade, so I almost never reach for it. I would have changed just a couple of things about this palette, but honestly the shimmer is delectable. This is pretty expensive, so to only love like one shimmer is a little bit of a bummer. But honestly, that matte, ooh, that matte is, if you like that shade, that matte will rock your world. Okay, this is where I feel like you guys might be a little bit surprised on how I ranked these. So coming up at number 9 is a Dollar General brand, Believe Beauty, and this is their Golden Disco palette. I was driving home from North Carolina on a vacation trip with my family, and we stopped in to the Dollar General because they're about every mile up in North and South Carolina. Somebody wanted something to drink, and I happened to walk by the makeup, you know, as one makeup lover does. And I saw this and I was like, this is very, very interesting. I think I'll just put this in my cart. Thank you. It looks more used than it is. My son asked me for something to play with to keep him occupied as we were driving. So, you know, naturally I handed him the eyeshadow palette I just bought, and he was in the back seat, his little car seat, swatching it all over his arm. It was the cutest thing ever. So it looks more used than it really is. But okay, let's talk about the quality. Delightful. So most of these look like shimmer shades or satin shades, but this brown is kind of like a creamy matte formula, and it is so beautiful. It smokes out in the outer corner so nicely. This black has like these gold particles in it. I was even using like this shade to deepen the outer corner. I was actually grabbing for these 3 a lot. This one, and this one to build like a decently pigmented eye look, and then I was bringing in this shimmer and this shimmer, and this gold is beautiful. It's gorgeous. This eyeshadow palette wowed me. I thought I was going to end up using it as a companion palette because I kind of felt like these were all a little bit of a like shimmery formula, but they are called mattes. It says highly pigmented mattes, striking shimmers, and metallics. I'm telling you, this is like more of a creamy matte formula. Same thing with this, even though it looks more like a satin formula. So I totally was building my eye looks with this palette all on its own, not using it as a companion palette. You guys, I feel like if you haven't tried Believe Beauty's eyeshadow formula, you should. This was good. The next one also shocked me because I've been a hater of eyeshadows from this brand for a while. This has been one of the first palettes and formulas that I feel like I have quite enjoyed. So this is the Paradise Shock palette from NYX. I love this color story in general, so it already wins points with me for that reason, because I love reaching for warm tones and browns and oranges and love pairing them together. I'm totally ignoring the 2 pops of color in here for the matte shades. I don't always reach for every single shade in a palette, but they actually have a light teal and a dark teal. So if you wanted to build a teal look, you totally could. They even have a shimmer that would pair very nicely with those 2 shades. So for that reason, I'm not mad at it. I have never been a huge fan of the matte formula, but I think the matte formula in this one is a step up. It's super blendable. It's quite long lasting. I told you guys I love the color story, but honestly, the shimmers are the best they've ever done in any of their palettes. There is a topper in here, which is this one in the corner here that doesn't have a whole lot of base pigment, so it's mostly like a shimmery shade, but the other ones are honestly delectable. Way better than they've ever done before. So I was really pleasantly surprised with this. I kept reaching for this. This is also just a great fall palette. Not overly affordable because NYX just isn't, but honestly, the quality of this just blew me away. The next one that I have, I think, is a subscription exclusive, so you can't get this on its own, but it's the Alloy Palette from Natasha Denona. I feel like Natasha Denona, both in formula and in color story, is often a hit or miss for me. I'm not always blown away by every single one of her launches the way that I am with some other brands, but this is a color story that I love. I love warm tones on me. I love the fact that she has like 3 matte shades. While I get pretty much the same look every single time, it's such a beautiful look. These shadows are super buttery. They blend themselves. They're quite long lasting. The shimmer formula is good. So nothing overly complex about it. It's just a really good palette because the color story and the formula is very, very nice. Something that if you loved this color story enough, you could kind of travel with something like this. It's just a color story that I love, and since the quality was also something that I could love, it was one that I kept reaching for all the time. Okay, coming in at number 6 is from Odin's Eye. It's the Jewels and Gem palette. When Odin's Eye launches palettes, I usually pick them up. I like that Odin's Eye, for what they are, they keep their palettes around the $35 to like $45 range, and you usually get a pretty broad range of mattes and shimmers, and so the palette's usually worth it. In this case, there's about half the palette that I will use, just more of the kind of burgundy brownish tones, and I generally will stay away from some of the blues and greens, especially on an everyday basis. The formula on the mattes is so good from Odin's Eye. I know that their quality has definitely gotten better from the stuff that I've tried over the years, and I feel like this one is consistently a decent matte formula. The shimmers in this are also super beautiful. My only one bummer is that high shade, which again is just a topper. You don't get a whole lot of base pigment to it, and that's always disappointing. I'm telling you guys, I hate when a shadow is a topper. The first time I swatch it and I'm like, oh no, it's just not chunky. This one in Swoon is like this light multi-chrome goodness. Again, mattes are super buttery and beautiful and blend together, and I love the variety of shimmers in here. Odin's Eye has been my #1 palette. If you guys saw my 2022 eyeshadow ranking, one of their palettes made it to the top spot. It was just amazing. I would say this one obviously not as good, but overall was pretty impressed with this palette. Okay, now we are down to the top 5. The next one that I have is the Cosmos palette from ABH. I actually thought this color story was going to be a lot darker than it ended up being when it got here, and I don't necessarily love the matte to shimmer ratio. This one, just like their most recent release, they put one more shimmer than matte, and I feel like that does them a disservice, because if they had one more matte and they made a little bit more variety in some of the mattes, you could build 2 very, very distinct eye looks off of those mattes. In this case, I feel like the look that I get with the mattes comes out very similar very often. And so what I end up changing is the shimmer, which is what I end up using to kind of change the overall look of the eye. The shimmer formula in here is so good though. And honestly, I know there has been some talk about like the criticism that there are less shades, that these are smaller palettes with bigger pans. For me personally, I actually quite like that. I have pretty big fingers and I apply all my shimmers with my fingers, and those smaller pans are really hard for me to like get my fat little fingers into, so I kind of like that these are bigger pans. But none of these are topper shades. They're all super soft, super buttery, super light reflecting, and the mattes are my kind of color story. So that's why I ended up liking this. Yes, ABH has a pretty powdery formula, but still I feel like it blends itself and I don't ever get any fallout. So I ended up just loving this a lot more than I thought I was going to be honest with you. This one in Quasar, oh, such a beautiful, beautiful shade. And then this one in Sun looks so good on the eyes with some of these warmer tone matte shades, so I felt like that was a really good palette. Okay, the next one, it really shocked me. It shocked me because of the color story, but I don't love the whole thing. Let me tell you what it is. So coming in at number 4 is the Yucca palette from Natasha Denona. So I told you guys it's a hit or miss with Natasha, both formula, but mostly color story. There have been a lot of kind of out there color stories from her, at least even recently, that I feel like are more vibrant than they are neutral in some of her older releases. I feel like I kind of got this palette mostly to review initially because I'm only going to grab for kind of the orange shades. The greens I probably won't reach for on an everyday basis. I just don't do a lot of green looks. Even though they're very beautiful, I just don't find them extremely easy to wear to work. But there's also nothing wrong with the matte formula. The matte formula is really good in all of the mattes. You get a pretty decent variety so that you can build depth with this palette in both like the green tones and the orangey browns. There's two in here that are creams. It's the Calathea shade and the Fuchsia shade, and I think that they're a decent cream formula. But what does it for me is the shimmers. The shimmers in here are so fantastic. The variety of shimmers is so good. I was reaching for this palette and skipping a lot of the matte shades and going for every single shimmer. I didn't put this palette down from testing until I was like, okay, I've tested that one, I've tested that. I had to test them all. They're so good. And like at least one of these, this one down here in Macchia is like a duochrome. Oh my gosh, you guys. It is so pretty. I didn't think I was gonna love green shimmers as much as I ended up loving them. So good. The formulation is beautiful. They're super light reflecting. They're so buttery. The shimmers were fantastic. So overall, not necessarily like a color story that I absolutely love. The shimmers are what did it. Totally made this palette worth it. Okay, you guys are gonna find this completely boring, and I am so sorry that I have to do this, but coming in at number 3 is a palette from Pixi. This is the Rosette Ray. I could not give you a more boring mauve-y tone, basic neutral palette, and I am so sorry that it can't be more fun, but the quality of this is so good. These are super buttery matte. The shimmer formula is super light and it's so everyday wearable, and every single time I created a look I just felt like, wow, that really complements my eye color, my skin tone. It was so easy to work with. I love the tones of all of these mattes. I love the tones of all of these shimmers. I bought this and I feel like it took me a while to start loving this because I think I did try this on camera for the first time and I was like, it's okay. And then I kept reaching for it during the testing phases and I was like, why do I love this? Why do I love this? Oh, it's because I'm boring. Okay, got it. But that's super important. For me, who spends most of my time at work, it has to be a palette that I can incorporate into wearing at the office. That's just the way it is. So I fell in love with it. I did. The quality is really good on this. I'm not gonna lie. These are not the most light reflecting shimmers ever. They kind of like are an amped up version of the ones from MAC. They have more light reflection than the MAC ones do, but again, more on the sophisticated side. Kind of like your wedding appropriate formula in both mattes and shimmers on a budget. Okay, coming in at number 2 is a really big one. This one is the Culture 2 palette from Juvia's Place. Not a full rainbow color story, but pretty darn close. And again, these mattes are not always shades that I reach for on an everyday basis. I'm gonna reach for a lot of oranges and a lot of burgundy tones. And since this palette is about like half and half in mattes in terms of like what's more neutral and what's more colorful, I don't necessarily find myself reaching for every single one of the mattes or going to work and all that. But every one of these shimmers is so fantastic. There's the multi-chrome Joss in the corner. It is one of the most gorgeous green multi or duochrome shades that I have. This Afrobeat is green to purple flip. Is so beautiful, but like look at the colors. You get such a good variety of shimmer shades in here. I would be remiss not to put this at number 2. My most problematic matte is this one in burgundy, which is called Dashiki. I love that shade. I love building a shade like that in the outer corner, but it is kind of a difficult shade to work with. Like it does get a little bit patchy. It does kind of like over blend, and it's a shade that I would want like to stay really rich and deep, but it does over blend. That makes this palette a little bit problematic. It's the shimmer formula and the duochromes that really save it. It's probably not even gonna translate on camera, but they are just so gorgeous. And you get like the most variety of shimmers that I have like in a palette altogether. And I was just like, okay, I gotta try this shimmer shade. I gotta go to this one. I wore this one on the eyes the other day and I was like getting so many compliments on my like pretty bronzy look that I had created. So mattes weren't bad. It honestly was just that one dashiki shade. Okay, prepare to be bored out of your mind for my number 1 spot. I feel like I like owed it to you guys to be a little bit more creative, but I just can't. I love this. This is the Earth Sides palette from Kiko Milano. This is from their Beauty Essentials collection. I'm not even sure you can get this palette anymore. Again, this is a palette that I ended up trying on camera for the first time when I tried a full face of Kiko Milano, and I was not through the moon about it. I thought, okay, you know, it's halfway decent, it's all right. But it was the everyday looks for me that I kept creating that were so like rustic and beautiful, that weren't over muddy, but that gave me depth. And the shimmer formula, oh my gosh, not what I was expecting from Kiko Milano. So again, a palette that took me to use it like 3 times to go, wait a minute, Wait a minute, this is really, really good. I don't know, the shimmers are like delightful and like super buttery. I mean, they feel like butter, and you can tell like I've well loved this shimmer formula. Again, it is what I'm wearing on my eyes today. It's a basic neutral palette. I don't know why, but it gives me the feels right in my heart. So that's why it landed at number 1. It just is what it is. I guess I'm a basic lady. That is the very end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I will be linking my playlist up above if you guys are interested in seeing any of my other ranking videos on my eyeshadow palettes. But that is all for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you consider subscribing if you're not already, so that I can catch you in the next video. Bye guys.